A missing woman has been found and is now charged with falsely reporting her own murder. 37-year-old Margaret Sweeney from North Carolina was recently reported missing. In a bizarre twist in this case, she's now facing charges related to faking her own murder. She's facing the charges of causing false report to a police station, false report of death or serious injury, and obstructing law enforcement officers. It's believed that initially police received a call which insinuated that Margaret was endangered or deceased. The day after, police were actually able to identify where she was by pinging her phone. She was discovered safe and unharmed. It's now alleged that the woman made anonymous third-party false reports to a friend and the Department of Social Services that she'd been murdered. Police at the moment are unsure why she may have done this, but they did say it does appear that there was some domestic issues with the boyfriend.
I killed my 5-year-old brother and ate his private parts. My name is Karina Ross, and I'm an 18-year-old Brazilian girl. It's all happening in 2019. My mother went shopping and left my little brother and me alone. When she came back, she found the front door locked. Completely worried, she shouted my name, but I refused to let her in. So she decided to call her brother to break down the door. When they both came in, they discovered a horrible scene, so gruesome that my mother fainted. 2 hours before, I went into my little brother's room to suggest we play a game. For no reason at all, I grabbed a pillow and strangled him. Then I took a knife and started torturing him. I removed his private parts and ate them. When my family discovered the scene, I tried to escape by fighting with my uncle, and they immediately called the police. I confessed to everything at the police station and was charged with first-degree murder. I'm now in a psychiatric hospital.
This is the scariest story about sneaking out. One summer night, a girl named Kim snuck out of her house to go to a party. When she got to the party, she started saying hi to all of her friends, got a couple drinks, and started having a great time. Later that night, when the party ended and everybody started to leave, Kim started walking home. And the whole time walking home, she had the strangest feeling that somebody was watching her. So Kim began walking a little bit faster. Then, out of nowhere, a man dressed in all black appeared on the road. Kim then let out a terrifying scream as the man sprinted towards her. The next morning, Kim's parents were woken up by somebody knocking on the door. When Kim's father looked through the peephole, he saw Kim's face, so he immediately opened the door. But what he saw when he opened that door haunts him to this day. It was Kim's severed head hanging from a nail above the door, with her head directly in front of the peephole. Kim's murderer was never found, and to this day the case remains open. And the scary part is, this man could be out there still doing the same exact thing he did to Kim.
I was burned in an oven because of my 3-year-old brother. My name is Jazira Thompson, and I was 1.5 years old when this tragedy occurred. On November 16, 2015, my mother, Raquel Thompson, who was 25 years old, and my father, Cornell Malone, who was 21 years old, both left the house to buy a pizza, leaving me alone with my 2 brothers, one of whom was 3 years old, and the older one was 5 years old. A few minutes after they left us on our own while we were in the kitchen, my 3-year-old brother opened the oven and put me inside. I didn't understand what was happening, and he then turned on the oven to the maximum temperature. Unfortunately, I died from severe burns. My parents returned shortly after, discovering the horrifying scene. My brother explained everything to them, and investigators concluded that my parents had put us in danger by leaving us alone. As a result, both of them were arrested and charged with child endangerment. What do you think their punishment should be?
These are serial killers that got caught for being idiots. And yes, this is a series, so make sure you follow along. This is David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam. He's best known for being the serial unaliver who believed that his neighbor's dog was telling him to commit the crimes. And he was really hard to catch. His attacks felt random and lacked pattern, other than the fact that a lot of his victims were women with long brown hair. But the thing that did this man in was that he parked illegally while committing one of the crimes. Cecilia Davis was out walking her dog one night when she saw a car being ticketed. And then out of nowhere, she sees this figure come towards her with what looks like a gun in his hand. She freaks out and runs away, but hears 2 gunshots get fired behind her. The next day, she learns that 2 people, Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante, had been shot in that area. So she calls the police and tells them everything she saw that night. The man with the gun, hearing the gunshots, and seeing the car with the ticket. And the cops did a real quick search through their database and found that the car had been registered to Berkowitz, who was already on their radar. And the second they went to question him about it, he confessed to everything.
This is the scariest story about the mistake. A girl named Kelly was on a business trip for 3 days, and she was so excited to see her husband and kid. But when she got home, the only one that was waiting for her was her kid. Kelly then asked, "Where's daddy?" and her kid then said, "Upstairs with a girl." Kelly immediately got a pit in her stomach and walked up the stairs slowly, and then opened their bedroom door and saw her husband in there with another girl. Kelly started to scream and cry, and her husband tried to explain himself, but Kelly wasn't listening at all. And in a pit of rage, Kelly went down to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. She then went back into the room and stabbed her husband countless times. The other woman in the room was shocked and completely lost for words. Kelly then pointed the knife at her and said, "You're next." But then the woman said, "Wait, he wasn't cheating on you. He thought you weren't going to be home till tomorrow, and I'm a party planner. And he hired me to set up and throw a party for you." The woman then showed Kelly the idea her husband had. Kelly then dropped the knife and couldn't believe what she just did. Kelly then went downstairs, grabbed her kid, and left. And to this day, nobody has ever seen Kelly or her kid again.
These serial killers got caught because of stupid mistakes they made. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff here, so make sure you follow along. Dennis Rader was a prolific serial killer in Kansas from 1974 to 1991. He was called BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill, because that's what he liked to do. But he also liked to taunt the police. He would send the police letters signed BTK, which could not be traced back to his real identity. So in the early 2000s, he had been dormant for over 10 years, but he still liked to taunt the police. And the early 2000s also brought new technology for communicating. So BTK, being the mad genius he was, wrote a letter to police asking if he sent them a floppy disk, would they be able to trace it back to him? And the police answered this letter basically saying, no, we totally can't do that. So BTK sends the police a floppy disk, and there is metadata on this floppy disk that says the last edit was done by someone named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. And then a 10-second Google search showed police that Dennis Rader was the president of the council at Christ Lutheran Church. Afterwards, the police basically came out and said that if Dennis had just kept his mouth shut and kept murdering, they probably would have never caught him. Let me know if you want more of these, because there's some other idiots out there.
I let a woman burn alive because she rejected my advances. I am Michael Lamar, an experienced firefighter in New York, and this is my story. 2 years after a painful breakup with my ex-girlfriend of over 5 years, I was going through a depressive period. During an outing with friends, I met Mariah White, a woman who changed the course of my life. I knew she was the woman of my dreams. Despite the predictable rejection of her advances, she crossed the line by humiliating me publicly in front of my friends, claiming to be far too beautiful for me. This humiliation destroyed the little confidence I had left, giving rise to a deep hatred towards this woman. A few days later, during a night shift, I was called to a fire, still haunted by the hatred and disappointment towards Mariah. As I arrived at the scene, I remembered it was the neighborhood where I had met her. We managed to save about 10 people from the flames. During the final check, I found Mariah unconscious due to the smoke. Surprised at first, relief overcame my emotions. I left her there, confirming to my team that no one was left. As I exited the building, people hailed me as a hero, oblivious to the dark story of that night. For a few years, I was able to live my life peacefully. However, thanks to a lengthy investigation, I was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison.
This sheepdog killed 8 coyotes while protecting its sheep. This video is of sheepdog Casper fighting off a pack of 11 coyotes who were trying to kill his sheep and eat them. Casper ended up killing 8 of them, but he was badly injured. The fight lasted more than a half an hour, and Casper's owner said that he disappeared for 2 days after the brutal fight. They were quoted saying, "We knew he was hurt because we found parts of his tail and blood and other things. So we were very worried." Casper eventually returned home with visible injuries. His owner said it looked like the coyotes just grabbed his skin and ripped it off. Casper was a watchdog for a flock of sheep in Georgia, United States. He was confronted by 11 coyotes and he had to choose whether to fight or fight because there was a flock of sheep and a pregnant dog under his watch. So Casper fought off 11 coyotes, of which he killed 8 in the initial attack, and then ran off into the forest and chased down the 3 other coyotes that escaped and killed them one by one. Casper then returned a week later with injuries to his neck, paws, and his tail was missing. He is now recovering. This might honestly be the Superman of dogs, and if you never heard the story about Casper the dog, well, now you have. The Hunger Games was actually based off a brutal Japanese novel called Battle Royale. Okay, so The Hunger Games is one of America's most successful franchises ever, for its unique plot of picking 2 kids from each district to fight to the death. But have you ever heard of the Japanese novel and movie called Battle Royale? If not, this is what The Hunger Games is based off of. The Japanese action thriller Battle Royale was released in 2000 and is based off the controversial novel from 1999. The movie follows a group of junior high school students who were forced to fight to the death by the Japanese government. The film drew a lot of controversy and was actually banned or excluded from distribution in several countries. In the movie, Japan just went through a recession, and the Japanese government passes an act to stop juvenile delinquency, sending a random middle school class to participate in a game called Battle Royale, where all the students in the class would have to fight to the death. This movie is extremely brutal, and it's definitely way more disturbing than The Hunger Games. People consider this to be better than The Hunger Games, and some people even consider it to be their favorite movie of all time. The movie, in my opinion, is extremely good, and this film created the Battle Royale genre, including Battle Royale games, anime, comic books, films, and many more. So if you're a fan of The Hunger Games, I really recommend to watch this movie because you're gonna love it.
The tragic death of Kobe Bryant shocked America and was a horrible way to start out the year 2020. So if you don't know who Kobe Bryant was, he was one of the most famous basketball players on the planet, playing for the Lakers for years. Before his death, Kobe Bryant was a household name. Everybody knew this guy. And he was one of the most beloved players and figures in all of the sporting world. Kobe Bryant meant a lot to a lot of people, and that's what made this helicopter crash so tragic. So on January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant and 8 other people boarded this helicopter. That day, everybody aboard was headed to Kobe's Mamba Sports Academy, where Kobe was set to coach his daughter Gianna's team. So on board the plane were Kobe and his daughter Gianna, baseball coach John Altobelli, John's wife Carrie and his daughter Alyssa, Peyton Chester and her mother Sarah, basketball coach Christina Mauser, and the pilot Era Zobayan. Everybody that day was headed to the youth basketball game at the Mamba Academy, and all of their lives would end in a horrific way. That day, the weather conditions were not ideal. There were a lot of clouds, it was very dark and hard to see, and if you don't know the geography of the area where this crash occurred, it's very hilly, big mountains everywhere. These dense and foggy weather conditions caused low visibility. Weather conditions which eventually sent the pilot and the helicopter off track. It sent it spiraling down at a very high speed, and it crashed into the side of a hill. The area immediately caught fire, there was debris everywhere, and all 9 of the people on board perished. There's a lot that went wrong during this flight. There's a lot of detail that I could go into, but it would take a whole nother TikTok. 2 mountain bikers who were in the area witnessed the crash and immediately called 911, but it was too late and everybody had already perished. Eventually, the medical examiners determined that all 9 of the people on board had died from blunt force trauma. And this accident is going to go down in United States history as one of the most shocking helicopter crashes of all time.
This is the moment 44-year-old Jay Black went live on Facebook just moments before killing his ex-wife. He'd also just shot and killed his pregnant ex-girlfriend.
Anyway, I just did something crazy, man. I just shot my ex-girlfriend in the head, yo. Felt like a dream. Like, I never thought I would be that guy. I can't go to prison, so the person that really started my depression and all of this is my ex-wife. So she next, and then I'm going to do myself too. But I just wanted to say this to people. Don't play with people's emotions, man. Don't lie on these men. Oh, here's my ex-wife right here.
According to Jay, his ex-girlfriend Tara LeBang, also 44, had said that she would deny access to their baby. So he shot her in the head, killing her instantly. He then went over to his ex-wife's house. Jay's ex-wife, Wendy Black, had filed multiple protection orders against him, which were all denied. She even went as far as writing a note. It said, "I am terrified because I do not know what he is capable of doing to me and the girls. I feel scared and I feel like my life is in danger." After killing Tara, he immediately went round to Wendy's, and with the children in an SUV that was parked in the driveway, he did a live stream on Facebook, confessing to killing Tara and saying that his ex-wife was next, and then he was going to kill himself. As you can see from the video, he then entered the property, and just after this, he shot his ex-wife and then shot and killed himself. A sad, shocking end to their lives.
This true crime murder case is honestly like something out of a very far-fetched film. Rachel Del Tondo was suspended as a teacher in Pennsylvania. Rachel was seemingly happy with her millionaire fiancé. However, in 2016, she was actually discovered in a parked, steamed-up car with a 17-year-old student. This student was Sheldon Jeter. Now, Rachel managed to convince the police officer that the pair were just talking and not to file a report because she didn't want to make her fiancé angry. Now, later in 2017, things did come to the surface. The report ended up being filed just in case anyone got wind of it. However, this was then leaked to the media and obviously the school that Rachel was working at. Rachel was suspended pending an investigation and her fiancé broke up with her. Bizarrely, 2 months after the suspension, Rachel actually ended up in a relationship with Sheldon's older brother, Bolton. Now, fast forward to May the 13th, 2018, Rachel went for some ice cream. Little did she know she was being watched. She ended up being dropped off at her parents' house at around 10:30, but she was gunned down at the bottom of their driveway. She was shot between 10 and 12 times. Now, although nobody has been convicted for Rachel's murder yet, Sheldon is now classed as the prime suspect. In another strange twist of events, in 2021, Sheldon was actually convicted of murdering his friend Tyreek Pugh, again after going for ice cream. Rachel's murder has actually been very hard to solve due to the lack of witnesses. Frustratingly, the murder weapon was also never found. However, GPS and CCTV footage has built a strong circumstantial case against Sheldon. It showed an alleged pattern of stalking Rachel around the time of her murder. Morgan Martin was 4 months pregnant when she vanished. It was the 25th of July 2012 and she was 17. She told family and friends that the father of the baby was Jacoby Flowers, aged 24. Morgan was actually looking forward to being a mum despite her young age, and she was excited for the future. Knowing this, her parents were immediately concerned when she vanished. They just knew she wouldn't have left of her own accord. On the evening in question, she left her home in Tampa just after midnight. She was actually wearing pajamas at the time and had just stepped off her porch to apparently show the sonogram to the father of the baby. She seemed like she would just be a couple of minutes and then would return home. So when she failed to come back, her mum was really worried. Her purse and sonogram photo were both left behind. Police got involved and questioned Jacoby. He denied knowing anything and also denied having anything to do with Morgan. He said he wasn't the father to her unborn child, they were just acquaintances and they'd never even been intimate. Morgan's family and friends were obviously really suspicious of him, but police just didn't have any grounds to arrest him. Frustratingly, Morgan's case went cold and she was never heard from again. Throughout the years, police re-interviewed people and looked over old evidence. Now, Jacoby's story changed when police showed him text messages that proved he had in fact been intimate with Morgan. He then decided to say that he'd actually begged Morgan to get rid of the pregnancy, that he was concerned about being potentially in trouble with police because she was a minor. He also apparently already had 3 children and was concerned about how it would affect his current relationship to have a new baby. In 2016, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Finally, in 2022, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder because of a plea agreement. He was given just 25 years in prison in exchange for the location of Morgan's remains. If the remains weren't found, he was due to spend 40 years behind bars. He told police where Morgan's remains were, but they weren't found. Now, it's not clear whether he lied about this or whether the wildlife had kind of just taken the remains away over the years. He was given the full 40 years in prison because of this, and Morgan has still never been found.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This is one of the most shocking love triangle murders I've ever heard. Erin Corwin was only 19 years old, living in California. She was married to US Marine Jonathan, and the pair were childhood sweethearts. They'd met when they were in middle school and even got engaged when they were in high school. They got married in 2012, and a year later, Jonathan was stationed in California with the Marines. They moved to 29 Palms and seemed happy. Things actually worked out well at first, and they met another couple that was stationed on the military base. The pair in question were Nicole and Christopher Lee. They had a similar story. They were childhood sweethearts, but they did actually have a 6-year-old daughter. The couples grew close, and Erin would babysit for their daughter occasionally. Things seemed to be going well, but behind closed doors, Erin and Christopher had started an affair. Jonathan actually found out about this and was understandably very upset. Erin convinced him that she would end things and it was just a one-off and it would not happen again. Jonathan gave her the benefit of the doubt, but unfortunately Erin did continue the affair. By June 2014, things got very complicated indeed. Erin was pregnant. To make matters worse, she was convinced that the baby was Christopher's and not Jonathan's. Erin was strangely excited about this, and she seemed to want a future with Christopher despite the fact that they were both married to different people. On the 28th of June that year, Christopher invited Erin hiking at Joshua Tree State Park. He told her he had a surprise for her and she thought he might propose. She lied to Jonathan about where she was going and met up with Christopher to start the hike. Unfortunately, the surprise was not what Erin had hoped. Christopher would strangle Erin to death during the meet and threw her down a mine shaft. Jonathan was obviously worried when she didn't come home that night, and he reported this to police. Investigators got involved and quickly found out about the affair, so they questioned Christopher. He denied having anything to do with the disappearance. Tellingly, just days later, he left the Marines and then moved to Alaska with his wife and daughter. Meanwhile, police were examining tire tracks in the area where Erin's car had been found. The tracks matched Christopher's vehicle. A month or so later, Erin's body was also discovered. Christopher was arrested and pleaded not guilty. He admitted to the murder but claimed it was not premeditated. He claimed that Erin had confessed to him that she had SA'd his daughter. He said he flew into a rage and killed her. The jury did not believe this story and he was sentenced to life in prison.
This is the New York City Murder Mansion, one of the most haunted places on Staten Island. In reality, this place is called the Kreischer Mansion and was built in 1885 by a man named Balthazar Kreischer. Originally, there were 2 Kreischer mansions. One belonged to Balthazar's son Charles, and the other belonged to his other son, Edward. Only one mansion survives to this day, and it was the one owned by Edward. Only about a decade after the mansions were constructed, Edward took a pistol, walked outside, and took his own life. And after Edward's death, Charles went crazy. He hired psychics, he held these huge Ouija board sessions in the parlor room of the house, and he wanted to contact his brother to see if he actually died by his own hand. It's still a mystery whether Edward actually took his own life or if he was murdered. Now, if you ask me, doing all these Ouija board sessions and spirit contact sessions in the house, you're asking for the place to be haunted, and yes, it became haunted eventually. But that isn't the end of the bloodshed at the Kreischer Mansion. So in the year 1998, the Kreischer Mansion was bought with the intention for the property to be restored. But in the year 2008, a shocking revelation occurred. Apparently, the caretaker, Joseph Joe Black Young, was a hitman for the Bonanno crime family. And it was discovered that a few years earlier, rival mob associate Rob McKelvey, pictured here, had been murdered inside of the Kreischer Mansion. And his murder was brutal. He was murdered in the entryway to the house. He was dismembered inside of the building. It was a very, very bloody scene. And then his body was burned in the furnace in the basement. So this place is definitely cursed, it's definitely haunted, and for years people have been saying that this is the most haunted place in New York City. I mean, just take a look at some of these photos. I don't know what these green orbs are up here. I'm not really an orb guy, but they do capture some interesting stuff there. But then look at this. This is an apparition that was caught on camera in the Kreischer Mansion just a few years ago. And I mean, there have been so many full-bodied apparitions caught on camera there. I'm not really that big on spirit photos, but some of these just can't be denied. I'm not even showing the craziest ones. So if this story interests you and you want to see a full overnight ghost hunt that we did there, you can go check out the new video on the New York Post's YouTube channel or on the New York Post website. The series that I'm involved with and that I host on there is called Haunted, Abandoned, and Hella Creepy. And this is the first episode. It just premiered today. We stayed overnight at the Kreischer Mansion. We caught some incredible evidence, including, this is the craziest thing. This is something that you don't see all the time when you ghost hunt. We were down in the basement where the body was burned, and we asked for a sign, and one of the light bulbs hanging from a string, actually the light bulb that was right in front of us, it was on the whole time we were shooting. And as soon as we asked for a sign, the light bulb just started to flicker in front of us. The whole cast and the crew were like, what the hell? We all looked at it. And all of a sudden the light bulb flickers and it slowly fades out and burns out completely right in front of us. So yeah, check out Haunted, Abandoned, and Hella Creepy right now on YouTube. Just search for the New York Post. Super excited to be hosting the show. And yeah, let me know if you want to hear more ghost stories from New York.
Quick trigger warning for part 2. The details of Elisa's death are quite hard to listen to. Now that she had full custody of her daughter, the abuse of Elisa escalated really quickly. Awilda took her out of her private school and enrolled her in a public school. The school's principal quickly observed that Elisa, now aged 5, was emotionally disturbed, withdrawn, and was having regular toileting accidents at school. The principal and Elisa's teachers also noted multiple bruises, and Elisa had started tearing out chunks of her own hair. On March 20th, 1994, Elisa was admitted to hospital with a broken shoulder. This injury was actually found to be 3 days old. Elisa's teachers contacted social services to say that they thought she was being abused, but this was rejected due to lack of evidence. And in December that year, Awilda actually withdrew Elisa from school permanently. She'd also started using crack cocaine again. With Elisa now permanently at home with her mother, the abuse escalated even more. She was locked in her room for most of the day, was not allowed to socialise with her siblings, and was forced to use a chamber pot kept in her bedroom. She was actually forced to eat and drink the contents of her chamber pot. She was regularly kicked, punched, burnt, and Awilda would hold her upside down and mop the floor with her face and hair. She was hung from a curtain rod for Awilda's entertainment, and she had a heavy chest of drawers dropped on her toes and fingers. She was also sexually abused quite regularly. On November 15th, 1995, Elisa was beaten so badly by her mother that she lost consciousness. Awilda had slammed her head into a concrete wall so hard that she dropped to the floor, and it caused a brain hemorrhage. Elisa lay in the house, lifeless, for 2 whole days. Awilda actually contacted her sister at one point and said that she was laid on the floor with fluid leaking from her nose and mouth. This was found later to be brain fluid. Her sister urged her to call an ambulance, and she said she would the next morning. The next day, a neighbour came round, and Awilda made no attempts to hide Elisa's body. She was laid there on the floor, and the neighbour immediately called an ambulance. Elisa was pronounced dead, and an autopsy showed a catalogue of injuries. She had broken fingers, broken toes, damage to her internal organs, evidence of sexual abuse, and a massive brain injury. Elisa's funeral was held on November 29th, 1995, and there were around 300 people in attendance. Awilda Lopez pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was given a term of 15 years to life. She's been denied parole a number of times, the latest being in 2022.
This is Larry Nassar, the former doctor to the United States women's gymnastics team, and a serial child molester. Before his fall from grace, Larry was a very well-respected doctor, and he held a very high position in the sports world. From the year 1996 to the year 2014, Larry served as the National Medical Coordinator for the USA Gymnastics team. Basically, he was ensuring that all the competitors on the team were fit, he would treat injuries, he would do checkups, all of that. Allegations that Larry had been attracted to and had been touching minors first surfaced in the early 90s. But it took until the year 2015 for all of this to come to light, so in all of those years, he was allowed to do all of these things to these young girls completely unchecked. So in 2015, a gymnast and her coach reported Larry to the USA Gymnastics officials, and in 2016, USA Gymnastics completely cut ties with Larry. But it turns out that for years, decades, Larry had been touching young minor girls while they were getting exams from him. One former gymnast named Rachel Denhollander stated that Larry had abused her 5 times during 5 doctor visits in the year 2000 when she was a minor. And after these accusations came out, the case was blown wide open, and so many gymnasts came forward and said that Larry had sexually abused them during their checkups, including Simone Biles, who at the time was one of the most famous gymnastic athletes on the planet. According to these girls, when they were minors, Larry would groom them. He would say nice things to them, offer them great benefits. He would send them flirty messages on social media outside of office hours when he knew they were underage. And yeah, like I said, during these examinations, he would frequently touch them, probe them, do all sorts of deplorable things to these girls. Well, this turned into a huge story because apparently even the FBI was involved in the cover-up of this abuse. And a couple of gymnasts, including Michaela Maroney, had to go testify before the U.S. Senate to expose this cover-up. You see, Larry had been protected by the organization he was involved with, and for years he was able to carry on with this pattern of horrific abuse without any sort of checks or ramifications. But finally, that all came to an end. There's so much more to this story, so many more graphic details, including what he did to the girls at a camp in Huntsville, Texas. And as of January of 2018, over 135 women had come forward and stated that Larry Nassar abused them. This was a guy that they trusted, that was hired by the organization they were involved with to help protect them, to make them better, to heal them. And he ended up causing so much damage that's so irreparable, it's horrific. And even later in 2018, a judge stated that they had identified over 265 victims of his serial child molesting. And the judge stated that there were probably so many more that would never come forward, that they would never know about. Thankfully, though, some justice was eventually served here, and Larry was sentenced to 40 to 125 years in prison. And I think we all know how child molesters get treated in prison. I remember this being a huge scandal when this story broke, and the cover-up and everything. It's just such a sad story, but I have to commend the bravery of the athletes for finally coming forward and ending this abuse.